Welcome to the KeyHire Small Business Podcast.
When it comes to running your business, do you often wonder, how could I run it more effectively? How could I run it like special operations in the American Armed Forces? How can I instill those core values in my people to be as dedicated and well-trained and of service like these special operators are in the Armed Forces? Well, today we're going to learn how to do that. Welcome to episode 20 of the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. My name's Corey Harlock, and I'll be your host. KeyHire, we're helping small businesses grow and scale using our talent. And I'm going to be your host today. And our guest today is Mr. Josh Wathen from the Green Berets. And a couple things to know about Josh. I had an opportunity to go shooting with him. He's a former Green Beret, Special Forces Weapons Sergeant, and a Special Operations Combat Medic. He's won 2 Bronze Stars, one for achievement made in the combat theater and one for valor. And he's been a serial entrepreneur, and he's been a part of building and transitioning lots of different businesses, and has a really cool story. And we are super lucky to have him on the show today. So Matt, let's bring Josh up on the screen.
Hello.
How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Corey?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for taking me shooting. That was a cool experience for me, and I'm hoping I can continue on and get some competency with some firearms. You're a great teacher.
I think you did well. It was great having you out.
Thank you. So let's just get into this, man. What are the core values, or when it comes to the Green Beret, what maybe it might be helpful for people to understand, because Green Berets are much different than the SEAL teams or the other special ops. And I guess each department of the service has their own special operations in very different levels, right? So could you give us kind of the 30,000 foot overview of what the Green Berets are to the Army versus to the rest of the armed services?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, Green Berets are warrior diplomats. Our primary mission is to go 200 to 300 miles behind enemy lines, make friends with the locals there that despise the powers that be, and raise a fighting force of 500 to 1,000 locals. Then train them, employ them, and empower them to help us kind of be a thorn in the enemy's behind. And what that does is it gets the enemy focused on us. So when the main effort comes through, their logistics and communications are compromised. And this obviously sounds very similar to starting a business.
Yeah. Creating the smoke screen and getting the big guns rolling through. So, the Green Berets are the highest division within the Army, correct?
No.
The highest special operators?
No. So above the Green Berets would be the Joint Special Operations Command. Their old term is the Delta Force guys.
Okay.
They do like hostage rescue, things like that are more kinetic dynamic. And while the Green Berets have 9 different missions, so doing rescues, raids, targets, things like that is within our skill set. Our primary mission is to train and force multiply.
Okay, very cool. So then you would be kind of at the same, would you be like to the Army what SEALs are to the Marines?
Yes. So the Green Berets and the SEALs are both considered tier 2 units. And then within the SEALs, you have Development Group, which is their tier 1 unit, also known as SEAL Team 6. And within the Army, you have Delta Force is what they were previously named, and they're a tier 1 unit.
Cool. You're going to hate me, but as soon as you said Delta Force, I think like those horrible Chuck Norris movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you watch those and think, man, that guy, like, they did no research when they made those movies. Like, he's not doing anything we would be doing out there. But
I mean, there's a value to everything. If lots of people watch that and join the armed forces and you get some good dudes out of it, I'm down with it.
Very cool. Well, thanks for the background. I appreciate that. And I think it's helpful just to have the context, right? And so, so we spoke briefly, but maybe walk us through like what is leadership within the Green Berets, or what are, I mean, I think we talked about core values or leadership, or what makes that arm of the service and those group of individuals work so well and allow for them to accomplish these missions that they're set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a selection process for a reason. There is no sense in trying to change who somebody is. And a big part of selection for the Green Berets is what's called team week, where you're put under physical and time pressure, you're given leadership opportunities, and everybody has to work together. So being a good teammate is the beginning of being a good leader. And the three character traits that I saw get picked up the most were people that told the truth, even if it was not good for the moment, people that were of service to their fellow man, and the folks that would never ask anybody else to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. That kind of put everybody into a position where there was mutual respect, and you didn't have to hold each other accountable because you didn't want to be the guy that was falling behind or somebody else had to carry your weight.
Okay, that's awesome. And you had referenced when we were having lunch the book Leaders Eat Last.
Yes, sir.
And I've actually I purchased the audiobook and I've been listening to it as I've been driving back and forth. And I think, was it him who talked about like the biggest thing about these special operations groups is trust. Like they will take someone with lesser ability that they know and can trust will deliver on these three key values over a real specialized operator who you don't know what they're going to do or they're not going to deliver on these things. Is that kind of, what is your thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think skills can be developed to increase your capability, but if your character is poisonous, then it doesn't. The more skills you have actually makes you more of a threat to the team, if you have a bad character.
Help me understand that. That's an interesting statement.
Well, I think that if you're a highly capable individual, but you're not team focused, that the ego is what drives your decision making, not the benefit of the team. And I find that the same thing is true in business, right? If you're only concerned about you and what you can achieve for you, then you'll do things that are detrimental to the team itself and the business. You'll make decisions that may give you a moment of glory, but will be completely counterintuitive or contradictory to the mission of the business or the team. That's
super interesting. And it makes me think of like in business, it's another Simon Sinek quote, but like the high performing asshole, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you want to know who the asshole is in your business, just ask your employees. They'll all point to the same person, right? And they become toxic and kind of someone like, yeah, they might be making you money, but what kind of damage are they doing on the back end? And how long can, are you going to keep other people? And it's just ripple effects or toxin that kind of spreads through the business and infects others, Yeah,
absolutely. I think the best visual I know of is everybody's heard of rising tide lifts all boats. Well, if you've got a high performing asshole on your team, he can be the dam that broke. And all of a sudden, all the water comes out from underneath all the other boats.
That's a great way to put it. So let's dive into your three core values. And I just want to kind of distinguish. These aren't like the Green Berets, don't have a plaque on the wall. This is what you've kind of pulled out of that organization and take with you as you're kind of working with businesses and doing your own startups and working with individuals and coaching, right?
Yeah. Now, these two things you hear all the time from your instructors while you're going through the qualification course, but it's not written on an official document that I've seen, at least not in those words. The common adage for Green Berets that's written everywhere is men that say what they mean and mean what they say. And if you carry that,
all three of those, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. So the first one was do what you say you're going to do. Was that the first one?
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth. Okay, so let's walk. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious, but is there anything more to that you would add to that statement or why it's effective?
Yeah. Telling the truth is easy when it's good. when you made a mistake and it got somebody killed, you're going to tell the truth. Because if you don't tell the truth, we can't fix the mistake and stop somebody else from getting killed.
And so I think you just added a lot of context to that, Josh, because I think most people haven't made a mistake that got someone killed or had that potential. And so when you say it, there's a lot more weight to it than, running a business and, I didn't get the sale, but I'm going to lie about it and say it's still in the pipeline, right? So for you, it's got some real meaning and gravity to it.
Well, no, the way I translated that into a business environment is Dave Chappelle quoted somebody, and I can't remember who he quoted, but he said to fire someone or get rid of somebody's livelihood is akin to killing them. And so if you are in business and you make decisions that cost people their livelihood, essentially you're killing them.
I agree with that. It's we always talk about how you got to take it seriously, like this whole mentality of is we'll hire them if they don't work out, we'll just fire them. Like, no. People have families. They got to put food on the table. They have mortgages. They have putting kids through school. Like we got to take this stuff seriously. So I can understand that on my level, but obviously you've lived it on a much different level. What was the second one? It was
be of service.
Be of service. Now this is a big one, right? Because we hear talk of servant leadership, and I know people that say they're servant leaders, and then when I get in the business and watch them do what they do, it's not how I would define servant leadership. So how do you define be of service?
The true test of service leadership is a measurement of sacrifice for the people around you. And so if there's no sacrifice that you're making for those around you, you probably need to take another look in the mirror and ask yourself whether you're really being of service.
In the context of business, help people understand, because the question I have is, okay, well, someone's going to say, well, I'm working 60 hours a week. I'm sacrificing time away from my family and things like that. But what other types of sacrifice, or how can you define, what other things can you use to define that might help someone say, okay, well, maybe I can be more of service, or maybe I'm just scratching the surface on this stuff?
Yeah. I think one of the most common things is covering down for a coworker, right? Like everybody's got their lane, their roles and responsibilities as defined by their job description. But most commonly, your coworkers need help with this or that, and you have some expertise or some time or some access to tools to be able to help them achieve their mission. And you're not going to see any benefit for that other than doing the right thing. And I think a big part of service to me falls within that kind of integrity sphere of when no one's looking and it doesn't matter to anybody else. Are you going to do what's generally considered the right thing, even when it's not beneficial to you? Right. And the hours you put in, I mean, I watch Jeremy Minor a lot for sales advice, right? I think he's really great. And what he says all the time is, yeah, people say I'm working 60 hours a week, but are you really? How long are you taking for lunch? How much time are you on social media? How much time are you on your phone texting your girlfriend or your wife or whatever when it's not important? If you put in 8 solid hours of work and that's all you're doing is revenue generating activities or accomplishing the project or whatever it is, there's a lot of time in there to help people. And part of that is the discipline of saying no to things that aren't as important. So the skill development here of being of service is learning how to prioritize the important over the urgent, how to delegate effectively, and how to follow through. I think that's a big piece for me personally, and the Green Beret community is men that say what they mean and mean what they say is another way of saying men that follow through on their commitments, right? Because if you say it and now you have to prove that you meant what you said. That means you have to carry out what you said. And that if you do that as a general principle, it will naturally create kind of this filter for yourself to go, do I really want to say yes right now? Because if I say yes, I'm going to do it. And it makes you take a look at your calendar and your priorities before you just agree to make somebody happy in the moment.
And I think that also leads to credibility, which leads to trust. And I think at the end of the day, I talk a lot. It's being a business owner is building a leadership team that you trust. Because without trust, you're the micromanager. You're working a million hours a week. If you don't trust people, what do you have? Right? You have a bunch of individuals doing stuff. There's not a lot of loyalty. No one's going to go to the wall for you. No one's going to be selfless and say yes to your needs because they're going to be thinking, well, I got my own stuff to do.
Right. And then you lead by example, right? Everything you do, your team will do.
So that's point number 3, right? Don't do anything, or don't ask someone to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself.
That's right. That's right.
So walk us through that one in your world, through your lens. What does that look like?
Well, if it's dangerous, dirty, depressing, lots of D words, go through it. Understand what you're asking somebody to do. And that's a difficult thing to do with business too, right? Because I'm not the marketing guy. I'm not the technical guy. I have my stuff that I need to grow my skills in, but I need to at least dabble. I need to go through and understand what I'm asking somebody to do, because otherwise I may be asking you to do something that's 100 hours of work, and in my head, I think it's 10.
Right.
Now we've got a problem and a miscommunication. So, and the way that I find I can kind of accelerate my understanding of this is to go through some of this stuff with the team. And that can be just as simple as a weekly meeting, going through the project development so that I get a feel for the pain points and where the congestion is in the pipeline. Right. I can get a feel for who's outperforming who on the team, who is being of service and who is just out for themselves. And you have to ask those questions. If you're not going to actually do the keystrokes and have the conversations with your clients and prospects that your team is, then you have to talk to them and be probing with your team so you get a deeper understanding and recognize that you're an authority figure. You've got to lower the guard of the meeting, and it's got to be okay for them to tell the truth. As soon as you're that disciplinary parent within your business, nobody's going to tell you anything. You've got to be a coach.
That's a great point. And I just want to go back to the don't ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do. And you use the example of marketing, right? But if you hire someone to do your marketing and then you say, I need all this done by the end of the week. So if kind of tying all this in, and if that person says, Josh, do you understand what you're asking me to do here by the end of the week, right? Like, I'm going to have to camp out and live at the office for the next 5 days. And then that's where you kind of sit down and say, okay, walk me through what I just asked you to do. And that's kind of, you might not know how to do it, but you're saying, okay, help me understand and let's chunk this out, because the expectation of myself isn't I wouldn't be here for 5 days. So I can't expect you to be here 5 days to do that. So let's make this manageable and work together and maybe change the deadline or change the function or change my expectation.
Yeah, that's all very true. But I would add 2 pieces to that puzzle. All one, right. As a leader, it's your job to ask them, not their job to tell you, do you know what you just asked me to do? You've got to be aware of that and open that door for them. That's part of opening the line of communication. The second piece of that puzzle is if it is something that needs to be done in a week and it means living at the office, not asking somebody to do something you wouldn't do means that you need to clear your calendar and live at the office with them and get that done.
Okay, that's cool. So, and thank you for doing that. Those are great points of clarification. So let's move into the mistakes. And I think we've already kind of danced around this, but when people are trying to build a culture in their office around, having honest employees, having people that are willing to do whatever it takes, and having people that are selfless and willing to help serve the rest of the team. there are a lot of guys like you out there banging this drum, right? Like you look at all the like Jocko Willnicks and all these different special ops guys. They all seem to be SEALs, but you know they all talk about this too. And but it's not easy to do, and it's easy to say we're going to be selfless and we're going to tell the truth, and then you can derail that in a hurry. So walk me through maybe some of the mistakes or failures you've seen from business owners in terms of trying to implement, because I think everyone wants a culture where people are selfless and telling the truth and not asking people to do what they wouldn't do themselves. I think that's the dream. That would be, you have a well-run, if your company's not doing well, you're definitely on the right track to achieving that. But implementing it is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start off with nobody's perfect. If you have an expectation that you're going to give a presentation and then everything's going to be perfect, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
And while everybody understands that, they get all inspired and they go, "We're going to do this." And just set your expectations accordingly, that this is a lean in process. It's a growth process. You're going to pour some water and some sunlight on a plant and it's going to grow a little bit every day. Also understanding that the whole point of this is that you don't confuse what's simple with what's easy, because these are very simple concepts, but they're not easy decisions. And when it's a hard decision, that's when it matters. When it's easy to tell the truth, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's that 1-2% of the time where it's really difficult. That's when you get the opportunity to really prove yourself to be the person that you want to be.
And I think it feels like the onus is more on our owner or the leader in that moment. So I effed up, right? I made a mistake and I'm going to try to live the values of that we presented. And I'm coming to you, Josh, and saying, I just blew a $500,000 order.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some very conscious thinking and a step back from someone who normally would have said, that's it, right? I'm ripping in, versus, okay, let me step back and try to not punish someone. And I think having the courage to tell the truth doesn't mean there are no consequences, but it means we're going to work together on this. And you got to go through the progressions, right? If it's the first time, we'll take action. If it's the second time, maybe there's more severe action. If it's the third time, maybe it's time to say this, it's not the right fit. But walk through kind of, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on the mindset as a leader, hearing that for the first time, an employee's come to you and said, I'm going to live our core values and I'm going to be honest with you right now. And you're not going to like what I have to say, but here's what just happened. How do you as a leader kind of process that? And then what comes out of your mouth after that? And how do you manage that situation to maintain that trust and maintain that culture, not just blow it up and say, well, it doesn't matter. I told the truth and I still got the same old.
Yeah. First thing you've got to do is understand the situation. Period. What happened? How did it happen? Let's see if anything's recoverable. Let's understand the situation and the problem itself so that I can see how this developed. Because big mistakes are usually a lot of small mistakes all piled into one inflection point, right?
Yeah.
It's like sin. It's 1% wrong direction, and before you know it, you've turned 180 degrees and you're walking away from the direction you should be walking. Okay.
Right.
Secondly, I would approach that the way that I would want to be approached if I made a mistake. How can I help? What do we need to do to solve this problem, and go with a team effort? Depending on the mistake, the level of the position that person holds, what their work history is, their track record, all of those things should come into account. If you're the person that's there and the first one there, last one to leave, you're helping everybody around the office. Did you not understand something? Did you have a personal issue that you tried to shoulder and it crushed you? And so you let work go by? What happened? That's the number one thing. Let's solve the problem first, and then let's deal with it. And look, if you've made a big mistake and this is the second or third time and you keep doing this, well, you're not learning, right? And while this may not be a good fit for you at this firm, that doesn't mean that I'm going to slander you or tell other people not to hire you.
Right.
I will recommend you for positions that are a good fit for you. But there's just not room here for people that aren't willing to grow, and you've demonstrated a lack of ability to grow.
Right.
So how can I help you move on with your life? Because I'm not interested in removing your livelihood. I'm interested in helping you find livelihood outside of this firm.
You just brought up such a good point that, and it reminded me, it was a lesson I learned before I ever managed people. And so I'm going to get on my soapbox here a bit, but I lived in Australia for a year, and I worked for a chef named Paul Maroney. And Paul Maroney was trained by the Roux brothers in London. And that's significant because those are the same guys that trained Gordon Ramsay. And so I worked in a kitchen with a Gordon Ramsay before Gordon Ramsay was ever popular. This guy was a maniac. He used to throw plates, Royal Dalton plates full of food at people. I loved the guy. He was brilliant. But he fired someone in his kitchen one time, and it was a woman. And he turned around and he said, "This is your last week working for me. You'll never work for me again." Then after the shift, he pulled her into his office and said to her, "Where do you want to work? Tell me where you're going to apply, and I will call that chef and recommend you." And as crazy as he was, he understood she wasn't great in his kitchen, but it didn't mean she wouldn't be great in someone else's kitchen. And just because someone doesn't work in your environment doesn't mean every environment is perfect for someone. And just because they're not working in your environment doesn't mean they won't be a star in someone else's.
Yep, that's exactly right. And there's a good piece to that puzzle too of, I don't like fear-based leadership. I don't think that if that's all you're doing, you're dead wrong. I'll say that flat out. But I will say there is a time and a place where somebody is affecting the work environment and the culture, and it needs to be done right then. And it needs to be done in the environment that they're affecting. That happens a lot on special forces teams. If you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're lying, you're doing all that, and it's causing other people to kind of create this little following behind the poisoned apple, then it needs to be cut off with all the other pieces of the fruit watching. And say, look, you're off the team. You need to go down to the B team. I'll see you in a meeting in a minute. And then, it's kind of a biblically referenced thing, right? You fear God, but God loves you. You do the same thing. You establish that authority. So there's a little bit of fear and understanding what that authority means, but then you follow up with, how do I help you? I want the best for you.
Right.
But that had to happen based on the way you were acting, because you challenged the authority in the room, and there's a hierarchy for a reason. We cannot have that.
Right.
And hopefully there's been multiple coaching conversations and mentoring conversations before that.
Surprise.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to be shocked by it. But I think the other side of that is, as you're saying it, my thought is like, and that also builds the people that are going to stay. You're gaining credibility and trust by doing it in front of them and saying, look, this ain't working out. We talked about it. They always say that praise in public and do that. But sometimes it makes sense to let the team know, I got your back, right? I am sick of it too. And here, I'm going to take, you guys can't take action, but I can, and I'm going to, right? I got you. Yeah.
Well, it raises the seriousness level and the intensity as well. Like that's a big piece of this. No, this is real right now. And I think as much as you need to be of service, you need to love and care for the folks that are working around you. You still have to recognize that this is a cutthroat world in certain places, and you need to act accordingly, because we're playing for keeps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Other people want those dollars that you're trying to put in your pocket. Other people want that position. I've got 25 applications sitting on my desk right now wanting your job. If you're not going to earn your job every single day, somebody else will. And I want somebody who's going to be proactive, that I can trust and I can empower. If you're not that person, you're still a person. I still love you for that. I'm still going to try and help you for that, but you're not the person on my team.
Right. And that's a cool point, because we talk all the time about, and the last thing we ever want to do is disparage small business owners, because they're the heartbeat of the country, and they risk more than most people to start a business, and they carry this weight and burden of providing for their people, right? If I had $1 for every business owner who said, the thing that causes me the most stress is knowing I got to run payroll every 2 weeks, and I got to pay these people because their families are depending on it. And it's a hard balance between that, right? That pressure, and being kind and understanding people are going to make mistakes. You got that kind of pressure from one side, and you kind of have to build a wall or find a way to kind of stop that pressure, to take a moment to be kind and be patient and seek to understand, and make a rational decision, and still treat people with respect.
Yep. Yeah. And, all of this conversation kind of brings me to a quick story.
Yeah.
There are people that just need to be gone, and anywhere they go, they're going to destroy stuff. And you need to recognize that and fire them quickly. And there will be times where there are few times, and hopefully if you're good at interviewing and you're using KeyHire, right? Like, you're not going to get these people on your team. But we had a guy on my team that just was a dirtbag, wouldn't show up, would get himself hurt, would do all of these things. So before we deployed, he ended up getting pushed to the B team. And we had started a packet not to push him to another team, but to chapter him out of the Army. And we never got that packet completed. And he ended up finding himself on another team. And the deployment after our deployment, about a year later, he was the only medic on base. And he was sleeping in his room when some of the teammates got shot, and was not able to treat them. And so they died. And so, like, I just say this to say that you need to be very, very careful about your understanding of your team and what you're going to do with them. Because if it is a consistently toxic individual who just has themselves on their mind and destruction on their mind, and they don't care, then don't put them on somebody else's team either.
So there's a distinction to be made between, this is a good person in the wrong environment versus, I think the assumption is we always want to assume everyone's doing their best.
Yes.
Like, you might do your best and still do a really bad job, but you just weren't in the right spot or didn't have the right support. But I think there's a small percentage of people out there that doing their best isn't of interest to them, right? They're always looking for that shortcut or whatever it is. And I don't think it's a huge part of the population, Josh, but I think it might even be 1% of a percent. But when you recognize those people, Scott Peck, the guy who wrote Road Less Traveled, he wrote a book called People That Lie. And it was about I'm going back, someone might correct me on this, but it was about like, how does he define evil people?
Yeah.
Right? There are some just evil people out there that don't have virtue or aren't trying to do their best or aren't trying to help anyone else. And so that's a good distinction as well. And the other, so how much time do you have left here? Do you have a bit more time? Because I have a question I wanted to add, or just a point to raise to see what your thoughts are on it, because you said what the recruiting process or the trial to get into the Green Berets, what did you call it?
So there's the selection process, which is a month long, and then there is the Special Forces qualification course. So if you get selected, you get an opportunity to try the Special Forces qualification course, and that is anywhere between 9 months to a year and a half, provided you don't get hurt or fail.
And they're kicking your ass the whole time.
Not physically necessarily. There's
a week or anything like that for the Green Berets.
That's more in selection. So selection, you have the first week is PT week. So you're doing rucks, runs, lifting, obstacle courses 2-3 times a day every week. Second week is land navigation. So they put you in the woods with no GPS and no flashlight, or at least in my day, you had no GPS and no flashlight.
Yeah.
They tell you to go find a T-post 6 miles away, and you do that 4 times throughout the evening, and you're timed on that exercise. And then the last week is team week. So they'll throw you, here's a Jeep with 3 tires that weighs 2,000 pounds. You have 18 guys get it 4 miles down the road. And they'll give you different options like that. And they put a different person in a leadership position for each event. So you get to see how they're going to actually lead the team. You get to see how they're going to follow throughout the whole thing. And then the qualification course, it changes depending on what General decides is more effective or what they're trying. But when I went through a 3-week leadership course. Then I went through a 7-week small unit tactics course where you're actually learning your ambushes and recons and all that kind of stuff, living in the woods. Then I did 3 weeks of SEER school, which is survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. What do you do? How do you prevent yourself from getting captured? What do you do if you get captured? That kind of thing. Then we have 2 to 4 months of language school, depending on what language you get. So you can speak the native language of the countries you're going to go to. You have your job training, which is 3 months for weapons sergeants, engineers, and communication guys, and a year long for the medical staff. So the first half of that is basically a trauma course, where these days the first half gets you qualified nationally as a paramedic, and then the second half is like a little bit of everything. You do clinicals, you do veterinary, you do anesthesiology, surgery, things like that. And the guys that graduate that get a bachelor's in nursing.
Very cool.
Then the last piece of that is Robin Sage, where it's a 4-week exercise. You have 2 weeks of planning and 2 weeks of doing your mission. And that's done all across North Carolina and a little bit of South Carolina and Virginia. And they spread out, 12 teams, 16 teams, give them a mission as if we've infiltrated a host nation. You get a bunch of National Guard guys and volunteers that provide a guerrilla network. You live in the woods, you run missions. It's the real deal.
Very cool. So most small business owners don't have that kind of access to selection, right? Like you guys really screen people out, but still people, all that to say, it doesn't matter what your screening process is, bad people are still going to get through on occasion, right? I always say we're dealing with people, you're never going to get it 100% right. And so don't put that pressure on yourself. We want to maximize the probability of getting it right. We want to minimize the probabilities of getting it wrong. And so that's what all that stuff does. And that's what having a great interview and hiring process does. So let's move into kind of help. If I'm a business owner and I want to start putting these core values into my business, and I mean, we can start from selection. We can start from your current team, and you pick the scenario that you want to speak to. But what are the top 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice you'd give a small business owner who wanted to up their core values in their business and really create a cohesive team? What are things they could take back to their business today and start working on?
Well, the first thing is work on yourself. Surround yourself by other people that you want to be like, that are ahead of you, so that they can bring you up. Educate yourself and then lead by example. Start practicing what you're about to preach before you preach it. That'll give you a little bit of insight into what the words coming out of your mouth are going to mean to your team when it's put into place.
And I'm guessing this isn't like a week-long process.
No, look, if you want to talk about leadership, you better be studying leadership every day of your life until you die and practicing it so you can learn from your own mistakes. It is not and this goes for any skill set that you have whatsoever. You are either constantly getting better at it or you're constantly getting worse at it. There is no sitting where you're at. Just because you have a degree I have a degree in business. I don't remember how to do like accounting. I did well in those classes. I'm a numbers guy, but if you hand me a ledger right now, look at you cross-eyed.
Was it you told me that most gun accidents happen to people that used to use guns a lot and then haven't used them for a while, and they pick them up and they still have that mindset, oh, I know how to operate this thing. I'm good with guns.
Yeah, I don't know what the stats are on the accidents, but I know in my personal experience, if somebody says, "Oh, I've been shooting for 20 years," then I'm watching them really closely because I'm going to know instantly whether they learned how to shoot 20 years ago or they've actively been training for 20 years. And usually I can look at their posture and their gear to figure that out. And then, yeah, because they have this false confidence of how awesome they are, they're extra dangerous because they think they know what they're doing instead of being cautious.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
What's number 2?
Number 2 is do some sort of team building exercise. Something where the team is going to, and I don't mean take everybody out to go drink. That's not a team. That'll build rapport and camaraderie if you're not doing, a dinner or a lunch or something like that to where they actually have time to just talk about their lives, then you need to do that. But like my friend Jason Hayes, he owns Topco Fabrication down in, south of Houston. But once a week, they do a little mini competition for 15 to 20 minutes that
I saw online they did push-ups one day or something.
Yeah, they do push-ups. He was telling me about a competition. One lady they have that doesn't like to do the physical stuff. So she came up with an idea where people were blindfolded and they had a spoon and a bunch of like a bowl of cotton balls, and they had to just scoop all the cotton balls out of the bowl blindfolded in a minute, and whoever got the most out won. But the funny thing is you can't feel what's in the spoon, so people were missing the bowl, and it was just hilarious. But things like that give them a story to tell, gives them something in common, breaks that ground, so that then you can really start working on the stuff that's important.
So a little distinction: team building, is it usually something that is more on the physical side? I'm not talking they got to go camp in the woods and rough it and like kill their own food for a week, but like something that gets you moving. Is that an important aspect of team building?
I think that what is done physically sticks a little bit better in your brain. I realize that's not how it works for everybody, but for me, and then the physical stress, like when you actually put physical stress on somebody, that's when you have immediate sacrifice. And so you have immediate buy-in, and it makes it stick a little bit better. Right. But you can't go too nuts with that, right? You don't want to hurt anybody, and not everybody's down to do that. So you got to find something that fits your culture or your company.
But it's not eating lunch, drinking beer, and talking about your family. That's not team building.
Eating lunch, yeah, it's team building, but it's surface level.
Okay.
Right? It's not as interactive. It's a free lunch. It's not, if it's you have something that's more intentional, something that's purpose driven, something that gets them engaged with the activity. Whereas having lunch is very passive. So if you're going to have lunch, have something for them to do. A partner exercise, a team exercise, little breakout sessions, something like that. If you're going to commit, say, a day once a quarter to doing something like that. The third thing is identify your natural and key leaders within your team and start empowering them to become champions of the process. Right? Because you've got to have buy-in permeate the organization itself. So identifying those that are in authority, those that have natural leadership capabilities, those that are service oriented, and then empowering them to be the leader that they naturally are, so that what you're trying to get your company to absorb is not just done by, if it's just you, there's no following. Right. You've got to have champions for anything, right? That goes with marketing, sales, all of this. The best referral you can get or the best lead you can get for a sale is a warm referral from somebody else. That somebody else is a champion of your business. Right. Same thing's true of leadership. You've got to have some other people that when there's 2 or 3 people around the water cooler going, man, I don't know about all this stuff, that guy's sitting there and going, let me tell you something. He means it. And he did this for me and that for me, and, looked out for my family or whatever it was. And then you start to get buy-in.
I think the caveat there too is select carefully, because don't just go after your high performer, because that could be the high performing a-hole and they could end up sabotaging the whole effort or setting it back anyway.
Yeah, a high performer does not translate to good leader. They could be both, but they're not the same thing.
That's
very, very different.
That's an awesome question.
Sometimes the best leaders are not your high performers, because they're the glue. They're the ones that are talking to everybody all the time, and they're not efficient, and like they're not getting the projects done, but everybody loves them. Right. So all right, great. I just found a spot for you to where you are achieving your objective, doing what you naturally do. And granted, I'm not going to pay you all day, every day to walk around and just talk to everybody, but we can make that a definite part of what you got going on.
That's awesome. I think that's a great place to leave it. So if people are listening out there, Josh, and they want to learn more about what you do, or they want to pick your brain about leadership, or they want to know what you're involved in your personal life, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I'm helping build a cybersecurity company called Triad Info Sec. You can go to our website at triadinfosec.io. Building that with a fellow veteran named Jason Rory from the Navy. I'm an Army guy. The second, I have a side business with a buddy of mine, Dennis Price, who helped start the Save Our Allies Foundation called polarisgroup.me. We teach shooting classes. We do networking events once a month at the shooting range, and just kind of slow growing that company and having some fun. And then I help volunteer with the Mighty Oaks Foundation. Mighty Oaks Foundation leads faith-based retreats, week-long retreats for veterans and their families to help combat PTSD and prevent suicide, as well as doing resiliency within the military itself to help combat suicide and the ineffectiveness that breeds within different units. I'm located in Houston. If you're out networking, you will probably see me eventually.
And I think you're on LinkedIn as well, Matt. Do we have his LinkedIn profile? There
Yes.
We go. And,
Yes,
and if you Google Joshua Wathen, I think you're the only one in Houston, so you should be able to find you. Can you go back to the Mighty Oaks there for a second? Because I think, Josh, you were talking about, there's a donations page on that website, right?
Yes, sir. There is.
If people want to donate, we're gonna drop a link to that in the liner notes of the show. And if you want to help some vets and help this organization help vets for a really good cause, we encourage you to donate to that program, because we know Josh is doing some great work out there, and we want to support our military families.
Yep. And if you go to the polarisgroup.me website, there will be a link on there for Heroes of Humanity. That is a nonprofit run by my partner that combats human trafficking and rescues people all over the world.
Awesome. Okay. And Matt, we'll drop a link to that website as well in the liner notes. So if people are wanting to donate, they can pick either of those organizations, which are super noble and helpful. So, man, thanks so much. I appreciate you being open to talk about your experience and helping out our small business owners, and look forward to more conversations and doing some more shooting with you coming up.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you. All right, there it is, Mr. Joshua Wathen. What a cool dude, and what a great story. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of today's episode and want to keep up on our new content, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you like to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, whatever your favorite platform is. Just type in KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about working with KeyHire and how we can help your small business, you can schedule a meeting on our website. You can be our next success story. We're a help-first organization, so we guarantee no selling, no weirdness, just help. Thanks for listening. I'm Corey Harlock, and until next time, stop grinding, start growing.